Greetings, friends, fellow patriots, and fellow citizens, and welcome to this week's edition of the We the People Convention Weekly News and Opinion Podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski. I'm the host of this podcast, and I'm the president of the We the People Convention organization. And this podcast and our website and our text messages and our emails and our donations to other conservative groups and candidates are all paid for by the generous donations of the donors, by the donors to the We the People Convention. If you have the means to help support our efforts to protect and defend our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity, please go to wethepeopleconvention.org and click on the donate link and give what you can. We'd greatly appreciate it. We're awful glad that you've decided to join us for this week's podcast. We welcome all of you who are new to the podcast, as well as all of you who've been with us for the 16 years we've been doing these podcasts and then previously radio shows and things like that. Many of you have been with us for that long. For those of you who are new, who are joining us from TikTok and Instagram now and YouTube and Facebook and everything else, welcome to all of you guys. We hope that you're finding something new here. We hope that you're finding something that's got value to you. It's real simple. This show is intended to look at what happened this week, get rid of the propaganda, or at least expose it, focus on what is factual that actually affects your life, your freedom, your liberty, your prosperity, your family, your community, our country. And then we don't just talk about it. It's not just about informing you, which is critical. It's about acting. And I'll talk during this show about things that you should do to help protect your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. And I'll reference some things that we already did last week that are making a difference. So welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us. I think you're going to have a real good experience in this week's podcast. And again, we are so thankful that you've decided to join us. Last week, it's a podcast I was very proud of. And I got calls from several people, many of them Tea Party leaders, who called me to say they thought the first half of last week's show was the best I'd ever done. That's saying something over 16 years. I thought it was very strong as well. I was very happy when it was over, and I told Nan, I said, wow, I'm really pleased with that. So what I did is I broke that out in our video section at wethepeopleconvention.org, and I posted it up under the heading, "We are in a hot civil war with the Commie Dems and the U.S." And that video is now on a separate page in the wethepeopleconvention.org video section for you to review and share. The bottom line is that video was intended to help put in perspective all that is going on, because there's so much going on, you just can't get your head around it. And I know that. It's hard for me. I'm sure it's hard for you as well. But the bottom line is, we have not won yet. We are still fighting the fight, and Trump is leading it and doing a great job. But as you're going to see in this podcast, the fight is on and it's real. And last week, I do regret that I talked about how this is a real hot civil war, meaning there's people being hurt, there's arrests being made, there's damage being done. And I didn't even bring up the fact that, police officers are being ambushed and shot and killed. That the left is attacking ICE agents, and you've seen the statistics of attacks on ICE agents are up, 800% or whatever. But as a number, it's not that big. But on the other side, we've been arresting and they've been shooting and killing some of the rioters and some of the people that are trying to overthrow our nation. And that's what I was pointing out last week. This is real. This isn't just a political thing. And as I pointed out last week, we are in a counter-revolution. The revolution was Barack Obama and the communists basically trying to take over our government, which they did do, and then use it against the people to destroy our nation so that China could rule the world. And I showed you last week in the podcast, go to our website, wethepeopleconvention.org, click on the button that says that China owns the Dems, and you'll see all the evidence of that. But the fight is continuing, and I'm going to show you, and it took some big steps forward this week. But understand, we are right now engaged in a hot civil war, and it's going to get hotter, and you and I need to be ready for that, and we need to know which side we're on and why things are happening, and basically be able to communicate that to our fellow citizens, our families, our friends, and other patriots, because this is going to be a really tough time for America. But what happened on Friday, I think will help a lot of you who've been frustrated because you haven't seen, quote unquote, enough action. When are arrests going to be made? Now, there wasn't an arrest made yesterday, but there was sure action taken that you and I said, that's what I voted for. That's what I'm talking about. The FBI raided the home of former Trump National Security Advisor John Bolton. Okay. And why was that important? Well, because it showed what they did to us can be done to them. I said on X, boy, how do they like it now when their homes start getting raided? The difference is that when they raided Trump's home in Mar-a-Lago, when they raided Roger Stone's home, when they did this to other patriots, they didn't have any evidence. There was no crime. It was pure political, a political assault. It was lawfare. This is evidence-based. These are people who committed crimes. And Michael Schellenberger was on with Jesse Waters and said, yeah, this is going to be Comey and McCabe and Brennan and those people. This is just the start. But we were pretty doggone excited about it. The FBI raided the Maryland home of former National Security Advisor John Bolton on Friday morning as part of a national security investigation involving classified information. The New York Post, which first reported the raid, said it was conducted as part of a high-profile national security probe. FBI agents began the search around 7 a.m. at Bolton's Bethesda home. They also raided his office in Washington, D.C. FBI Director Kash Patel, while the raid was going on, said, no one is above the law. FBI agents are on a mission. And this was a bit of a stick it in your ear to Bolton, because Bolton was the one, when Trump's home was raided, to say, no one's above the law, and you should know how to handle classified information. Yeah, well, Donald Trump was president. He was able to declassify whatever he wanted, and he did. He didn't break any law. They were looking for the evidence that's recently been coming out about Russia that they felt Trump had at Mar-a-Lago. That's what they were there for. They were there to cover up their crimes. John Bolton doesn't have the authority to declassify anything, and he printed a book where he shared classified information. And if it's in his home, he's committed a crime, and he needs to be prosecuted. And we are hoping that that's going to happen. This is the war on the deep state, folks, and it's going to continue. And, it's just a matter of us being, being ready for this to say, hey, enough. We're not going to put up with this more. And so then, we got into this whole, what is the deep state? Slowly, and I said in a podcast promo 2 weeks ago, equal justice is being restored slowly. And I know you don't like that. But it's important. It's important that it's being restored, and it's going to take time. But this was a story that came out this week that's going to play into this. Exclusive. Prosecutors secured evidence. Comey authorized classified leaks, but declined charges. What do you mean they declined charges? What the heck are you talking about? Declassified bombshell. FBI memo undercuts Comey's testimony to Congress and opens the door to new conspiracy probe. Federal prosecutors gathered evidence from James Comey's top lieutenants that he authorized the leak of classified information to reporters just before the 2016 election, but declined to bring charges, according to recent declassified memos that call into question the former FBI director's testimony before Congress. The bombshell revelations involving FBI General Counsel James Baker and ex-Comey Chief of Staff James Rubio were memorialized in documents that FBI Director Kash Patel discovered earlier this year. But the passages were originally redacted by the Justice Department in versions sent to Congress earlier this month. And Pam Bondi intervened and eliminated the redactions. They lied, they cheated, they stole classified information. They leaked it to the media in order to overthrow an election, the 2016 election, to rig the election, and then to overthrow a sitting president. The memo details evidence and interviews gathered by the U.S. Postal Inspection Service agents concerning classified information leaked to the New York Times in October 2016 ahead of the November election, in which Trump defeated Hillary Clinton. The U.S. IP investigation also revealed Baker disclosed the U.S. government classified information to the New York Times under the belief he was ultimately instructed and authorized to do so by then FBI Director James Comey. Okay? So this is not innuendo. This is not, hearsay. These are documents that document the actual leaking of classified information by the FBI Director James Comey. Okay, and then this other story came up about the IRS probe. IRS began criminal probe into Clinton Foundation in 2019, but it suddenly stopped. Memos show. Was a major investigation derailed? Well, years after the FBI was forced to shut down multiple corruption probes of Bill and Hillary Clinton's charity, the IRS under President Trump began a criminal tax investigation into the Clinton Foundation and its dealings with the other players on the global charity stage, but then abruptly stopped working with whistleblowers in spring 2019, according to IRS memos. You can't talk about the Clinton Foundation, a memo states, in recounting how IRS agents suddenly cut off contact with two whistleblowers they had been working with for weeks. One of the whistleblowers was a decorated former federal money laundering analyst who had testified for Congress about issues like terrorism financing. So again, we have documents that the government we pay for, who's supposed to work for us, was going out of their way to protect criminal politicians, meaning the former President Bill Clinton and the Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. We all knew it was true, and they just kept saying nothing to see here, nothing to see here. Well, now we're seeing it. We're seeing actual documents, okay? And this came out this week as well, and I put it at We the People Convention, and many of you looked at it if you got our text messages or emails. Smoking gun emails uncovered in Biden auto pen scandal. The Oversight Project obtained damning internal emails this week from the Justice Department revealing a higher level of understanding of the Biden administration that the auto pen commutations issued on January 17th in the former president's name were legally flawed. Okay, now that's saying it kindly. In addition to showcasing former Associate Deputy Attorney General Bradley Weisenheimer's his name, Weisenheimer's legal concerns, the emails provided by U.S. Pardon Attorney Ed Martin's office reveal that the Biden administration apparently misled the nation about the violent criminal nature of individuals who received commutations. Mike Howell, president of the Oversight Project, told Blaze News, this represents the first written black and white evidence of fundamental disagreement in the Biden camp as it relates to the pardon strategy. The emails obtained by the Oversight Project reportedly show that Weisenheimer, a 34-year department veteran, took issue with the apparent lie, noting that the communications about the commutations the White House has described those who reviewed the commutations as people who were nonviolent drug offenders. It's just wrong. I think you should stop saying that because it's untrue or at least misleading. I don't think it's close to accurate to describe all the clemency recipients as those convicted of nonviolent drug offenses. The 2,490 federal inmates who received the commutations are a motley crew of thugs, including murderers and violent drug dealers. So who did that? Who in the leftist Biden administration, as they're going out the door and they're pardoning Hunter and the J6 committee and Adam Schiff and all these people, says, oh yeah, let's commute the sentences of these 2,490 criminals. Biden had no clue. He didn't authorize this. They're illegal. and they're going to be made illegal. But the people who did it need to be charged. They usurped the authority of the President of the United States to give pardons that aren't legal. Man, this has got to come out. It's got to be exposed. And so this story is, I bring this to you because we're all concerned. Will any of these people be charged? Will Comey, will Strzok, Page, will Brennan, will any of these people be charged? And we've been talking about using the RICO statutes because it doesn't have the statutes of limitations and things. This was really interesting because it brings in a new charge that I hadn't considered before, and maybe you had not. This was Just the News with their podcast. And former top FBI agent, Russiagate perpetrators could face subversion or racketeering persecution. And this story will be linked in our podcast page, and you'll be able to go listen to the podcast. But listen to what he said. Former FBI agent and Navy SEAL Jonathan Gilliam says prosecutors may be able to build a criminal subversion or racketeering case against government officials who carried out the Russiagate scandal. I think also what we have to start looking at is things like subversion. Subversion like treason and insurrection, these are all criminal actions there's law for. Just the News reported Thursday that newly declassified memos show federal prosecutors gathered evidence from James Comey's top lieutenants, which we just talked about, authorizing that he leak classified information. When you look at these types of crimes, maybe they leaked this information, but was their motive and intent to subvert the government of the United States or a standing president or a president that was coming into office, Gilliam said. If that's the case, then the statutes of limitations goes out the door. Goes out the door. How's that? Subversion is defined in federal statutes as activities aimed at undermining a government or political system. Gilliam said he thought it was important for the FBI to also consider a racketeering case that multiple government officials conspired together to abuse intelligence and law enforcement powers. I believe it is important for them to go forward on a RICO case. And remember, that's what former AG Barr said they should bring against the Trump people. A RICO case. Why? Because it's incredibly difficult to defend against, right? So we need to do the same thing. I believe it's important for them to go forward on a RICO case because they link all of these individuals and they could show whether the statutes of limitations for these particular crimes have gone. Let's say they've passed, but they can't show that 2 or more people were involved in those crimes for the purpose of furthering their criminal enterprise. That's a RICO charge. Okay? So I had never heard that you could charge people with subversion, which is an activity aimed at undermining the government or political system. They absolutely committed subversion. So if that's the law, they all have to be charged. They all have to be charged. And so, Bondi at the DOJ and Kash Patel at the FBI, they're doing great work. They're working hard. It's, again, I said to you guys before, this isn't just Comey and Obama and Clinton and all those people. There's hundreds of people that need to be charged. Hundreds. This was a coup against the United States. And there were hundreds, if not thousands of people involved. And it's going to take an amazing effort to do that. And so I was stoked. I was really excited to see this news this week. Missouri AG Andrew Bailey resigns to accept federal role as co-deputy FBI director. Co-director with Dan Bongino. Well, why am I excited about this? Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey has announced his resignation from the state AG position to take a role at the top of the FBI silo. Pam Bondi has appointed Andrew Bailey as co-deputy director to serve alongside Dan Bongino. This outcome and appointment makes a lot of sense. Missouri AG Andrew Bailey has helped expose the DHS manipulation of social media and has pushed the envelope against deep state lawfare attacks against Donald Trump. Bailey has used the power of his state office for good purposes and provided cautious optimism he could do the same at the federal level in this position. Two weaknesses for the appointment of Kash Patel and Dan Bongino were that neither of them had large institutional leadership experience and neither of them had organized long investigative processes within the legal system. The concerns therein were never about intent, but rather their ability. Andrew Bailey provides a boost in experience that both director and the deputy are lacking. This is not a slight against Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. The appointment of a subject matter expert is strategically necessary and important. This guy will probably be the Attorney General after Pam Bondi. He was mentioned to be the Attorney General when they were talking about Pam Bondi. This guy's top-notch, MAGA to the hilt, and he is going to bring a whole nother level of experience to do like a RICO, type thing. It's really was a great move by Trump and Bondi and to get him to do this. So this is a war, a hot civil war, and we're fighting, in the streets, literally, in Washington, D.C., and L.A., okay, and with the exporting the illegal immigrants who basically were brought here to be an army to help overthrow our government, which I talked about last week. But it's also the deep state, okay? And there's going to be a lot of stories in this podcast that talk about the gains we're making. This was a big deal. Okay, Trump administration fires 37 intel officials, revokes security clearances for politicizing intelligence. U.S. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard on Tuesday announced that security clearances and any government employment for 37 current and former intelligence community officials were being terminated on the basis of their politicizing and manipulating intelligence, among other allegations. Being entrusted with a security clearance is a privilege, not a right. Those in the intelligence community who betray their oath to the Constitution and put their own interests ahead of the interests of the American people have broken that sacred trust they promised to uphold. Gabbard said the move was being undertaken at President Donald Trump's request. The decision means that 37 affected officials will no longer be able to access classified systems, facilities, materials, and information, will have their employment or contracts with the U.S. government immediately terminated, and will have to surrender their credentials. She accused the 37 officials of abusing the public trust by politicizing and manipulating intelligence, leaking classified intelligence without authorization, or committing intentional egregious violations of tradecraft standards. They're spies. They're bad. Okay? This is just terrible. And she fired them. And that's good. But they didn't stop there. They did not stop there. Wow. Listen to this. DNI Tulsi Gabbard unveils intel reorganization downsizing after bombshell weaponization revelations. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, now on Tuesdays when she fired those people, on Wednesday unveiled a massive reorganization of the U.S. intelligence community that will cut hundreds of positions inside her own office and put pressure on other spy agencies to do the same after bombshell revelations over politicized weaponization of intelligence. The current plan will cut, get this, 40% of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence workforce and save taxpayers more than $700 million per year, focusing the agency on its core mission as a central hub of integration, strategic guidance, and oversight of the U.S. intelligence community as it was intended to be after 9/11. Over the last 20 years, the ODNI has become bloated and inefficient, and the intelligence community is rife with abuse of power, unauthorized leaks of classified intelligence, and politicized weaponization of intelligence, Gabbard said. ODNI and the IC must make serious changes to fulfill its responsibility to the American people and the U.S. Constitution by focusing on our core mission to find the truth and provide objective, unbiased, timely intelligence to the president and policymakers, not political intelligence, not left-wing ideology put out as intelligence. Ending the weaponization of intelligence and holding bad actors accountable are essential to begin to earn the American people's trust, which has long been eroded. Under President Trump's leadership, ODNI 2.0 is the start of a new era focused on serving our country, fulfilling our core national security mission with excellence, always grounded in the U.S. Constitution, and serving the safety, security, and freedom of the American people. Wow. Wow, folks. There's a gut punch to the deep state. They're getting fired in droves, hundreds. And that's what we have to do. And that's what Trump is doing. And now you know why they didn't want Tulsi Gabbard to be the DNI, right? Now you know why the Republicans and Democrats and the swamp fought so hard against us. And we fought so hard to get her in. It's paying off. This is what we voted for. This is what we must have to get our government back, because these people were undermining our government intentionally for their own benefit. And firing them isn't good enough. They need to be investigated. Once they're fired, go through their files and see what they were doing, because it was criminal. She needs to make sure. Now, remember, she's in charge. She's the director of national intelligence. She oversees all these 17 or 18 agencies like the CIA and NSA and all these groups. This needs to happen there. They've been corrupt since World War II. They were part of killing Kennedy. They were part of trying to assassinate Donald Trump. This purge must continue. But boy, this was great news. It was great news. So I'm just telling you, here's your proof. This is a hot civil war. And it's body blows being thrown back and forth. And so let's go on to our next story, because this was the other part of this week's drama. All right. So what happened with redistricting? Last night, or actually this morning, I'm doing this broadcast on Saturday, August 23rd. They passed this in the Texas Senate this morning. But basically, the Texas Senate passed the redistricting on an 18-11 party line vote, and it now goes to Abbott's desk to basically redistrict Texas and give, theoretically, 5 more seats to Republicans. Now, again, that doesn't always hold up. They redrew the districts to be more favorable to Republicans, but the Republicans still have to perform for the people, the Republicans there, to vote for them. But theoretically, you get 5 more seats. Well, that's all hunky-dory, but what did Newsom do? He did what he threatened to do. Newsom signs California redistricting plan as Texas finalizes their new maps. California Governor Gavin Newsom on August 21st signed legislative packages to put a measure on the November 4th ballot that would redraw the state congressional map to favor Democrats. It already favors Democrats overwhelmingly. The tally in the lower state assembly was 57-20. The measure passed the Senate by a 30-8 vote and was signed into law by Newsom about 30 minutes after. The bill now is called the Election Rigging Response Act. Isn't that cute? The Election Rigging Response Act. Well, you mean, is it responding to your rigging of the elections previously, or to Texas supposedly rigging them now? Establishes new maps for congressional districts, that gives authorization for the redrawn maps to replace the current one, and declares a November 4th special election to seek California's approval of the change. Okay? So the bottom line is, I told you this is just blatant raw politics, total hypocrisy. And people aren't buying it, okay? The people are smart enough to understand. They rigged them first. Now Republicans are responding, and they're claiming that the Republicans are destroying democracy and breaking the law, right? And here they are signing a bill that overturns what Californians have voted on, which was to not have politicians draw their maps, but have an independent commission do so. Oh, we can't have that because we might lose our advantage by cheating, right? We want to keep cheating. And so the bill is going to come up for a vote on November 4th. There's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars spent. And I think there's a good chance that we're going to overturn this, okay? Because here's the truth, kids. For you guys listening on the radio, I'll kind of read some of this, but for you watching on your TV or on your computer or phone, here's a list of the Democrat states and what their jerry-rigging is like. In all of New England, there are no Republicans in all of New England. In Massachusetts, 36% voted Republican, 0 seats. Connecticut, 42% voted Republican, 0 seats. In Maine, 46% voted Republican, 0 Republican House seats. In New Mexico, 46% of the people voted Republican, 0 seats. Okay, who's rigging what? In California, 38% voted Republican, only 20% are Republican seats, and they're trying to take them away. In New York, 43% voted Republican, only 27% are Republican seats. They are the ones who are doing this. You can share that chart. I'll link to it on our podcast page so people understand. This is not them being fair. It's them continuing to be unfair. Democrats will always accuse you of doing what they're doing. But guess what? Guess what? They're not going to win because Florida's now going to redistrict. Ohio's going to redistrict. Missouri's going to redistrict. Kentucky and others. Because that chart shows you they don't have any more room to screw us. Right? Well, that idiot governor of, Massachusetts, where they don't have any Republicans said, we're going to redistrict to do the same thing. You can't. You don't have any more room. This is the Civil War. This is not, we don't want this. We hate gerrymandering. It's actually illegal, according to the Supreme Court. But you can't draw districts for political reasons, but they are. And that's why we got to do it too, because we've got to defeat the commie left, who's been rigging, our elections as well, in every way you can. We talked about the census, okay? And they did it with this by changing the maps, and they did it by bringing illegals into states and then counting them for the census, right? And then what is Trump doing to fight the war? This is big. Trump pledges to lead the fight against mail-in ballots. This is huge. President Donald Trump has been warning for years that mail-in ballots and voting machines are riddled with vulnerabilities that invite fraud and undermine trust in elections. President Trump announced on Truth Social that he will issue an executive order to put an end to mail-in ballots before the 2026 midterms and restore honesty and integrity to American elections. In a lengthy post on Truth Social, Trump announced, I'm going to lead a movement to get rid of mail-in ballots and also, while we're at it, highly inaccurate, very expensive, and seriously controversial voting machines. And I have more to say about that in the second half of the podcast. He argued that such machines cost 10 times more than accurate, sophisticated watermark paper, which is faster and leaves no doubt, and at the end of the evening as to who won and who lost the election. That post that he put on is on this page. If you go to Trump, pledge that We the People convention, you go to this, article, and you can see his Truth Social post. It's pretty long, but in the end of it, he said Democrats are virtually unelectable without using this completely disproven mail-in scam. Elections can never be honest with mail-in ballots, voting, and everybody, and particularly the Democrats, know this, as I and the Republican Party will fight like hell to bring honesty and integrity back to our elections. The mail-in ballot hoax using voting machines that are complete and total disaster must end now. Remember, without fair and honest elections and strong and powerful borders, you don't even have a semblance of a country. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Now, this is going to be interesting because the states get to decide how they conduct their elections. But Trump has tremendous financial leverage. He can withhold funds and say, if you have mail-in voting, we're not going to support you. We're not going to provide things that you really, really need. He's going to have to lay the hammer down, but it's real simple. This is the Civil War. They use COVID as a weapon to overthrow Trump, and they use COVID to rig the election with the mail-in votes. Now, again, a lot of people got confused. Trump's not against absentee voting. Absentee voting is when you request a ballot because you're in the military and you're overseas, or you're in the hospital and you can't go vote. Okay? He's not saying that. There's a difference between that and mail-in voting. Mail-in voting is when they send ballots to everyone, to every address they have, and people who no longer live in your household, you get 5 mail-in ballots or applications to request mail-in ballots. And there's no IDs and there's no checks. No other country in the civilized world allows for mail-in ballots. None of them do. Okay? So what are we doing? We're doing it because you can rig the ballots. And that's what Trump's trying to stop. So this is the fight. This is what we have to do, right? And so this tide is turning because the gerrymandering is not going to be allowed. We're going to defeat them with that. And then this story comes out that really spells out to you what's happened demographically and what's happening in our country. And the commie Dems, the reason they opened the borders and brought in 15 million illegals was because they needed voters, because you're turning away from them in the millions. Here's the proof. Death cycle, Dem bleed out is real and spectacular. Real and spectacular. With all the discussion of the mid-cycle census, and the fight brewing over proposed mid-cycle reapportionment, much attention is focused on the flight of conservatives and moderates from blue states to red states. And for good reason. Even if Donald Trump can't get an extraordinary enumeration before the regular census, meaning recast the 2020 census, blue states will lose significant representation in Congress in 30 and 33. California and New York will likely lose 4 House seats each by the 2030 census, and the other blue states could lose up to a half a dozen more. Americans have spent the last several years literally voting with their feet, and the bill will come due soon. The stampede away from the Democratic Party is occurring in battleground states, the bluest states and the reddest states, according to a new analysis of voter registration data by the New York Times. In fact, the first time since 2018, more new voters nationwide chose a Republican than Democrats last year. All told, Democrats lost 2.1 million registered voters between 20 and 2024 elections in 30 states along the Washington Sea that allow people to register with a political party. In the remaining 20 states, voters do not register with a political party. They just register to vote. Republicans gained 2.4 million, while the Democrats lost 2.1 million. Folks, that's a 4 million vote split, swap. They're not going to be able to win any elections. The Democrats are going down. It's a death cycle. What happened? With likely several factors have a role in the death spiral. Democrats spent the last decade focused on one man, Trump, and its agenda. That worked for them in the 2018 midterms, but blew up in their faces when the Russia collusion hoax allegations turned out to be nothing more than a hoax built on a dirty trick. Democrats spent 4 years covering up Joe Biden's senility and unfit for office while simultaneously claiming they were defending democracy while appointing Kamala James as their candidate with no elections, no primaries. More likely, though, the damage comes from Democrats' refusal to listen to voters. Wow, what a concept. You actually have to listen to the voters to get them to vote for you? To some extent, this also a result of Trump's derangement syndrome, which basically forced them to automatically reject any position or action Trump takes as fascism. This month, they took the form of defending criminals over better law enforcement in Washington, D.C., but that's not the first time that the Democrats have embraced 20% positions as a knee-jerk reaction to Trump. They did it with illegal aliens. They did it with the economy. If Trump wants it, they hate it, except Trump wants what the American people want. They're losing because they're idiots, okay? They're ideologues. They're cultists. They're commies. They want to see the overthrow of the United States. They don't want to see us get better. Not only do Democrats ignore the popular support for these positions, they refuse to offer any rational policy proposal to deal with these issues. They don't say, well, Trump's wrong for bringing the National Guard to Washington, D.C. Here's what we're going to do to fix it. No, there is no, here's what we're going to do to fix it. They're going to say, there is no crime in Washington, D.C. And all the black people are going, say what? What? Well, say what? Okay. We'll talk about the D.C. situation in the second half of the podcast, but this is, you can't win people over when you have no damn answers. Okay. They spent 4 years arguing that the problem with immigration was a lack of new legislation. Trump proved them wrong within weeks. Their response? They're flogging the same bills that Biden and Harris insisted would allow them to alleviate the problem, even if Trump simply used existing law to solve it. Okay? This is why they're doomed. And this is why you and I, must make the Democratic Party cease to exist. It's not the Democratic Party. It's been taken over by the communists, as you can see with the commie in New York, the Islamo-communists in New York. They're going to run for mayor. And the guy in Minneapolis and OAC, they hate America. They are the revolutionaries. We are the counter-revolutionaries. We must destroy them through what, as they like to say, through any means necessary, right? Gavin Newsom, we're going to fight fire with fire. Oh, yeah? Okay. You go ahead. You rig your state. We'll rig ours, and we're going to beat your ass. Okay? That's what it's all about. And you had to love this one. Holy cow. This was just terrific. Trump administration reviewing all 55 million foreigners with U.S. visas for any violation. What? What? We're going to actually look at the people who are in our country who have visas and finally go, hey, did you break the law? Hey, did you lie on your application? Should you be here? And this was kind of triggered by this whole thing about the Islamic truck driver who was not supposed to be here, couldn't pass the test for driving that semi, and killed those 3 people in Florida with this insane illegal U-turn on an interstate. And the Biden administration let him in after the Trump administration threw him out. Get this, 55 million foreigners with visas. Trump administration said Thursday it is reviewing more than 55 million people who have valid U.S. visas for any violations that could lead to deportation, part of a growing crackdown on foreigners who are permitted to be in the United States. In a written answer to questions from the Associated Press, the State Department said all U.S. visa holders, which can include tourists from many countries, are subjected to continuous vetting with an eye toward any indication they could be ineligible for permissions to enter or stay in the United States. Should such information be found, the visa will be revoked, and if the visa holder is in the United States, he or she would be subject to deportation. Okay? Since President Trump took office, his administration has focused on deporting migrants illegally in the United States, as well as holders of student and visitor exchange visas. The State Department's new language suggests that the continual vetting process, which officials acknowledge is time-consuming, is far more widespread and could mean even more. Even those approved to be in the United States could abruptly see their permissions revoked. There were 12.8 million green card holders and 3.6 million people in the United States on temporary visas last year, according to the Department of Homeland Security. The 55 million figure suggests that some people subject to review would currently be outside the United States with multiple entry tourist visas, and that has to be cleaned up. The State Department said it was looking for indicators of ineligibility, including people staying past the authorized time frame. This is the big scam about the such 300,000 Chinese students here, okay, who get a student visa. But then they graduate. No one checks to see if they went home. It's insane. And it was allowed intentionally by the criminals in our government who benefit from this. And now we're saying no. And this is where AI and Doge and things come in, because before they didn't have any systems to track these people. We need to know who the hell's in our country. And this is why I said, we should have Doge do the census using databases that you can buy from Google and Facebook and that the IRS and Social Security Administration has. Don't tell me we don't know how many people in our country. Don't tell me we don't know how many illegals are here. You don't want to know because you didn't want us, the American people, to know. You didn't know how much of our tax money was going to support them and how much they were being used to support the overthrow of our government. Now we're going to find out, kids. Now we're going to find out. And it's high time. It's high time that we find out. Wow. It's such a mess, folks. It's such a mess. And what President Trump is doing is unbelievably difficult. And we kind of get into this like judgmental thing of like, well, they need to do this, they need to do that. You're undoing probably 80 years of undermining our government, starting with Woodrow Wilson. And it's going to take longer than 7 months. But they're doing it. They're doing it. And so I love this response. And it's got to go even further. ICE to flood Boston after leftist mayor rejects Bonnie's sanctuary policy demands. This really made me angry. And this person, the mayor of Boston, needs to be arrested because she is breaking the law. After leftist Boston Democratic Mayor Michelle Wu attacked Attorney General Pam Bonnie's order to dismantle the city's sanctuary policy, acting ICE Director Todd Lyons fired back on Wednesday, saying the agency would flood the zone. Earlier this month, Bonnie sent a letter to Wu and other sanctuary city mayors and governors. For too long, so-called sanctuary jurisdiction policies have undermined this necessary cooperation and obstructed federal immigration enforcement, giving aliens cover to perpetrate crimes in our communities and evade the immigration consequences that federal law requires. You are hereby notified that your jurisdictions have been identified as one that engages in sanctuary policies and policies that thwart federal immigration enforcement to the detriment of the interests of the United States. You break the federal law. You have no right to break the federal law. On Monday, Bonnie told Fox News of her directive to the sanctuary cities. If they don't comply with us, we're going to work with other agencies to cut off their federal funding. We're going to send in law enforcement just like we did during the LA riots, just like we're doing here in Washington, D.C. And if they're not going to keep their citizens safe, Donald Trump will keep them safe. Wu's had a press conference on Tuesday where she arrogantly responded, the U.S. Attorney General asked for a response today, so here it is. Stop attacking our cities to hide your administration's failures. The Trump administration's failures? What failures? They're not failing on anything. Okay? She said, to hide your administration's failures. Unlike the Trump administration, Boston follows the law, and Boston will not back down from who we are or what we stand for. We will not back away from our community that has made us the safest city in the country. What a liar. What a joke. It's real simple, kids. Yes, states have rights, but our Constitution and settled law is that the federal law is in force whether you like it or not. If you don't like it, get your elected officials in the House and the Senate to change federal law. But you can't just say, we're not going to follow the law. We're not going to follow the law. And this became because we had no one like Donald Trump who defended the Constitution, who said, no, you can't do that. These people need to be arrested. Karen Bass, the mayor of LA, the Boston mayor, the New York people who flaunt the law. You don't have a choice. Do you understand? Federal law is in play. The federal government makes immigration policy. You don't. So when she says, we follow the law, unlike the Trump administration, no, you don't. You break the law. You're an indoctrinated idiot. And we need to bring the hammer down on them. And, people don't like that. People don't want to hear it. But that's what has to happen. So we're going to see what happens. But bottom line is, we've got to make these people follow the law. And until I told you guys, all these years you've been watching this podcast, what is this about? Equal justice under the law. If you don't have that, you don't have the United States. We as a nation are unique because our founding fathers founded a nation based on the rule of law, not of men. But Wu is saying, no, we're going to decide. The law doesn't matter. I'm the mayor of Boston, and I'll say you can't throw these illegals out of the country. On what authority? Zero authority. And yet we let them. We let this cancer fester. And why? Because the left wants these illegal immigrants to be here as their army to overthrow our government, our country. This is the hot civil war. She has to go to jail. And we need to drive out all the illegals in Boston. I know you don't want to hear that on the left. I know you've been convinced that this isn't true, but it is true. And if we're going to have a country, you've got to have the rule of law. And nobody has ever done more to enforce the rule of law than Donald J. Trump. And you better be really excited that they're doing these things because they're really hard, but they need to be done. Okay? So we're going to take a short break. I hope you enjoyed the first half of the show. We're going to break for a couple of messages about the We the People Convention, and then I'll be back. You've been listening to the We the People Convention News and Opinion podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski. We'll see you after these messages. The We the People Convention News and Opinion radio program is paid for by donors like you. You can donate to the We the People Convention and support our cause by going to wethepeopleconvention.org or by sending your check in any amount to We the People Convention, P.O. Box 6211, Akron, Ohio 44312. When you're playing a video, including our podcast, you'll see this little cloud button. And if you click it, it'll actually download the video to your hard disk. And this works on our podcast page as well. If you're playing our podcast, and it's going to be loud, so I won't play it for much, but there's our podcast playing, and you can see this little, download button. Okay. The other thing you got to notice on our podcast page is that there's a link here where you can send me a message about this podcast. Hey, it was great. Hey, I didn't like it. Something was wrong, or here's a correction, that kind of thing. You can use that link. And then these are the stories that I covered in this particular podcast. And you'll see there's links that go to the stories, to the articles that I used in reporting on that. So you can click on that. You'll also see that you can sign up for our emails and text messages, but you can also watch our podcast on Roku TV and on Amazon Fire TV. And these are the instructions for doing that. So this is all on our podcast page, right on the front page where the yellow button was. If you click there, this is our podcast page. These are the instructions for watching on Roku TV or Amazon Fire. And I watch our podcast on TV. It just feels more comfortable. So you can do that. We're also on Rumble. If you go to Rumble, you should join Rumble. And it's Tom Z at WTPC. You'll see our podcast there. So you can get us a lot of different ways, including on Apple iTunes. And then this is an audio version of our podcast. If you click here, it'll just play the audio of the podcast. It will not, show you the video. So people can, listen to that while they're jogging or, working out, working in the yard, or just relaxing and just want to listen to the audio and not watch the video. And again, this is available on phone, on your iPad, on your laptop, on your computer, any way you want. And you can share this whatever you see. If you're on a page that you really like, and you see an article that you think, geez, I've got to share this article, with someone in my family. You can send them an email by clicking on the little envelope. You can post it on Parler or MeWe. If you click on this, you get all kinds of options, where you can put it on Twitter or Facebook, whatever, which we don't support, but you can do whatever you want. So we ask that you share what you see on our We the People Convention site, and that you get more people to look at it, because that's the whole idea here, to help educate people, inform them. And then, as I said before, Link, we're not just about talk, we're about action. And in my podcast every week, which is published every Saturday, so if the new podcast usually comes out every Saturday, and in that podcast, I will ask you to do certain things that will help protect and defend your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. So that's the We the People Convention website. Come back often.
use it to be informed, and share it with others. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you for staying with us through the first half of the podcast. I think you'll enjoy the second half of the podcast. And again, we will link all those articles, on our podcast page. I also want to mention that we have this thing called a chapters player on our page. It takes until Sunday for it to be, done with AI. But basically, it's a player where you can just look through all the stories. And if you've heard some of the stories, you can just skip over them. But hell, there's a story I didn't hear. And you just click on it. It takes you right to the video for that story. And then there's a link that you can copy if you like that story and send it to other people via text or email. It's called our chapters player. I also need to correct that older video that I just showed because we're on X, Tom's EWTPC. You should follow me there because that's where I post most often and keep you up to date with the most important news. And I will put original things on there. We're on Getter now again, Tom's EWTPC. I just started posting there again this week. We're on Facebook. We're on MeWe. We're on Gab. We're trying to get out there, okay? And we're posting on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube. So we're giving you the information. It's up to you to share it, right? It's, we do appreciate our donors. We couldn't survive without our donors, and our donors have made a significant, they've helped save our country. We've punched way above our weight, but we know that everyone can give. If you can give, please go to wethepeopleconvention.org and give. But most importantly, share this podcast or at least segments of it or at least articles. We list all the articles that are the source of the stories in this podcast on our podcast page. And you can click on the link and go right to the article and share the article. That's what it's about. Being informed so that you can take action to protect and to defend your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. That's what it's about. That's why people watch this podcast. That's why you tell people about this podcast and share it. Okay? All right. So we're going to get into the second half of the podcast. Lots of stuff going on internationally and otherwise that we got to deal with. And it's so insane because things are moving so fast and happening so fast that you can't even keep up. But last Monday, not even a week ago, this historic meeting happened. Trump leads historic peace talks in DC to end Ukraine war. Why was it historic? Look at this picture. Every major foreign ally from Europe was in the room with President Trump. That never happened in World War II. That never happened ever. Never before was any president able to bring together the people necessary to find an answer to a war like Trump just did. Okay? Now, did they get to a peace deal? No, they didn't. And there's still lots of concerns. President Donald Trump and Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky sounded positive as they met at the White House on Monday as Trump pushed for an end to the Russian war in Ukraine. Zelensky was joined in Washington by a remarkable delegation of European leaders who rushed to the U.S. in support of Ukraine leader in the wake of Friday's talks between Trump and Russian leader Putin in Alaska. President Trump on Monday said the United States will be involved in the security assistance for Ukraine, but did not elaborate on what exactly that would look like or give any specifics. So Trump pushed for a trilateral meeting between Putin and Zelensky and Trump. And after the meeting, one of the European leaders said, yeah, we'll have to meet again in a month or two. Trump said, a month or two? There's 5,000 or 6,000 people dying a week. We got to do it in hours. He called Putin in Moscow at 1 a.m. Moscow time. Okay? But they don't get it. And so things are not going well. As these negotiations were going on, Putin was pounding Ukraine, pounding them with more missiles and drone attacks. And then after the meeting, Germany and France and those guys started to say, well, we can't put troops in Ukraine and we don't have the money. Folks, this is very dangerous. The fact is the Ukraine war is lost and we're trying to get Putin to agree to not take all of Ukraine because nobody really wants to defend it. They want us to defend it. They want you and I to send our sons and daughters to defend Ukraine. But we ain't doing that, are we? And Trump said, we're not doing that. And some of us are really upset about him saying we're going to be part of security, providing the security. Originally, it was like intelligence and stuff. But then, they started, saying, oh, maybe the U.S. needs to do more. We can't. It's not our war. It's their war. And they started it. And now they want Trump to clean up the mess. Folks, this is scary because Russia now knows. They know they could win this. And only Trump has a chance of stopping the slaughter. Oh my gosh. And then the left wants to criticize them. Oh, what a failure the meeting was and all this stuff. Shut up. And I thought this is an interesting story that came out this week. A man arrested in Italy was part of a group of people who planted devices on the pipeline to blow up the Nord Stream pipeline. Okay, and he was a Ukrainian. Because remember, they all said, Russia blew up their own pipeline. Remember that? And Tucker Carlson was losing his mind. Yeah, the Ukrainians blew up the Russian pipeline because the Europeans were paying for oil from Russia and funding Russia's war. That's how stupid this whole thing was. So be careful, folks. Things aren't always what they seem. And in that topic, I want to cover this story because I've had some criticism from some of you that I'm too pro-Israel and I'm not objective and I don't blame Israel enough. Well, baby, that's about to change right now. It doesn't matter now if they are children. Ex-IDF chief said 50 Palestinian deaths for every October 7th victim was necessary. Was necessary? Say what? Say what? The former head of military intelligence for the Israeli Defense IDF called the deaths of 50,000 Palestinians in Gaza necessary and required for future generations in leaked audio. Aran Haliva, and that's his picture right there, Alan Haliva can be heard in a newly released audio clip saying that for every person who died on October 7th, 50 Palestinians must die, even if they are children. The audio clips were aired by Israeli broadcaster Channel 12. The fact that there were already 50,000 dead in Gaza is necessary and required for future generations. Okay, you humiliated, you slaughtered, you murdered. Everything is true, the former military chief said, saying to Hamas. It is unclear when the statement was made, but Gaza Health Ministry has recently reported that more than 62,000 Palestinians have been killed since the October 7th, 2023 attack from Hamas. That resulted in the deaths of around 1,200 Israelis. The price I've said before the world, for everything that happened on October 7th, for every person on October 7th, 50 Palestinians must die. This is the guy who is the head of the military intelligence of Israel. Mr. Halabi said in a translation reported by the Jerusalem Post and other media, it doesn't matter now if they are children. I'm not speaking about of revenge. I'm speaking out of a message to future generations. They need a Nakaba, Nakba, every now and then to feel the price. The term Nakaba means catastrophe in Arabic and is used to describe the expulsion of 700,000 Palestinians from their homeland in 1948 during the creation of the Israeli state. Folks, when people say Israel's committing genocide, that's genocide. Israel's committing genocide. And this guy is admitting that. We don't support that. That's wrong. We condemn that. And you can't say, oh, these were all Hamas fighters, because even by their own estimates, at the height of it, Hamas had 30,000, 25 to 30,000 Hamas fighters. You're now saying you killed 62,000 people. When's enough enough? This is wrong, Israel. This is wrong. And President Trump and Marco Rubio need to say it's wrong. And our ambassador, Mike Huckabee, needs to say it's wrong. This is damning evidence, folks. This isn't Hamas propaganda. This is the Israeli defense minister saying he approves of killing 50 Muslims or Islamists for every one Jew killed. That's not the way it's done, kids. That's called genocide. Not good. Not good. This was also not good on the international front. We have all known this is true. We have suspected this, and this needs to be stopped, and people need to be charged. Report. DNI Tulsi Gabbard reviewing dossier linking Biden officials to Romanian coup. We screamed about this on our podcast when it was happening. We knew this was what was going on. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard is examining a confidential report alleging that senior Biden era officials played a role in Romania's December 2024 coup. This is a year ago, not even a year ago, according to a source inside the Trump administration. The dossier now on Gabbard's desk purportedly implicates former Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, his aide James O'Brien, and U.S. Ambassador to Bucharest Kathleen Kavalek. Their names appear alongside Romanian figures, including former Foreign Minister Lumita Abdesescu, ex-Prime Minister Marcel Calacu, and former President Klaus Iohannis, accused of working together to overturn Russia's presidential election under the justification of what? Of what? Russian interference. Russia, Russia, Russia. It's the same damn playbook, folks. It's the same playbook. The alleged allegations drew a sharp statement from former Russian presidential candidate Kalin Gorshescu, who spoke outside the Bucharest District Police Department, where he is under judicial restrictions. As you have seen, the brave DNI director Tulsi Gabbard has exposed all those who fabricated the file of Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election, where President Trump won fair and square. Gorshescu said, I guarantee that the file of the annulment of the election in Romania is also on the table of U.S. intelligence services, with clear perpetrators identified, former high-ranking officials from the Biden administration, as well as their tools in Bucharest. Gorshescu also accused French President Emmanuel Macron of interfering in Romania, vowing that he would be sent packing with his tail between his legs. The Trump administration has already taken action. In May, the Department of Homeland Security removed Romania from the visa waiver program, a step Romania's foreign minister admitted was retaliation for Washington viewed as fraudulent annulment of its elections. The U.S. State Department's latest democracy report likewise faulted Romania for violating voters' rights. Violating their rights? This is the same commie left here that tried to kill President Trump, arrest him, put him in prison for life, rig the elections, unleashed the Wuhan China virus to steal the election. They were doing this in Germany. They were doing this in the Netherlands. They were doing this in Italy. They were doing this all over. It's a world war we're in, kids. It's a world war. And these are the people who work for the State Department. It's illegal. It is against the law for the U.S. government to interfere in foreign elections. When are we going to make that clear? You know when we're going to make it clear? When we do to these guys, when we do to James O'Brien and Anthony Blinken and Kathleen Kavalek, what we did to John Bolton. The evidence is there. They broke U.S. law for their own ideological goals, and they thought they could steal the 24th election, so they weren't afraid of getting caught. But they lost the 2024 election, and now they're caught, and they need to be held accountable to the fullest extent of the law. It's outrageous. We're supposed to be the force of good. We're supposed to be the defenders of democracy, and yet the people voted in Romania for the Trump-like candidate, and we helped overthrow that vote. You damn commie Dems in the United States? Yeah, threat to democracy. Who's the threat to democracy? There it is, right there. You're the threat to democracy worldwide. You don't give a damn about votes. You only care about power. We got the power now. We're taking the power from you, and you got to pay a price, because if we don't have equal justice under the law, we don't have a nation at all. Wow, is Tulsi Gabbard your new hero? Holy cow. You bet. Another hero, another of my heroes, RFK Jr. And boy, he was fighting this week tooth and nail against the deep state, against the corrupt medical pharmaceutical companies. RFK calls out docs pushing COVID shots on kids, angry that CDC has eliminated corporate influence. For the first time in 30 years, the American Academy of Pediatrics has broken from the CDC to recommend COVID shots for children as young as 6 months. Are you sick? Raising ethical questions since its top donors include all the vaccine makers. And there's a tweet on the screen that you can see, and you can see it on my X account. This is a screenshot of the American Academy of Pediatrics webpage thanking the organization's top corporate donors. These 4 companies make virtually every vaccine on the CDC recommended childhood vaccine schedule. AAP is angry that the CDC has eliminated corporate influence. There they are, Merck, Moderna, Pfizer, okay? And was that Sanofi? I'm not sure who that is. I'm not familiar with them. But he said this really important thing, kids, really important. And RFK ain't playing around. Kennedy reminded the Association of American Pediatrics, you joke, you should be disbanded. You should not be able to operate. You are a tool for the pharmaceutical agencies to destroy and hurt our children, my grandchildren. Our daughter was forced to take a COVID vaccine because her doctor told her that the AAP recommended it. She didn't want it. She didn't need it. I'm mad about that. You should be mad about that. You are mad about that. Kennedy said to them, he reminded the AAP that only vaccines recommended by the CDC are covered under the 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, meaning doctors and hospitals would be liable for injuries stemming from COVID vaccines that they now give without the CDC's approval. Lawyer up, kids. Lawyer up. And share this tweet, share this story. It'll be linked on our podcast page with every mother, every young couple you know, because they're only tools of the pharmaceutical companies. And we need to stop them. And RFK Jr. did it. And it just never ends. I mean, again, we're talking about all the things on Trump's plate, the deep state and the rigging of the census and the elections and the mail-in-ballots, and then the whole medical thing. And like Nan said to me over dinner the other night, when is Fauci going to be charged? And I think he will. But there's so much. And this story came out. Health officials downplayed data on natural immunity, misrepresented a study, never updated their findings, right? We knew this. We talked about natural immunity, and some of our doctors talked about natural immunity during COVID. Oh, no, it doesn't apply here. Oh, natural immunity, even though it works for every other disease. Oh, no, you can't talk about that. Senior health officials responsible for pandemic response mischaracterized an early study on COVID immunity, downplayed natural immunity data, and never updated messaging about natural immunity versus vaccines because, quote, it was too costly to do so. They had all kinds of money for everything else, but no money for that. Oh, no. When the Center for Disease Control and Prevention said in August of 2021 that vaccines offered greater protection than a previous COVID-19 infection, not vaccine, meaning if you had COVID and you got over it, you had natural immunity, and that was better than a COVID shot. And they said, oh, no, it's not. You still need the COVID shots, right? Officials cite a study that never included any such conclusion. In fact, the study the CDC guidance was based on only focused on the effects of vaccinations following a COVID-19 infection, meaning in those that had already developed antibodies to the virus. Instead, the CDC touted it as data supporting vaccinations without mentioning prior infections, a serious flaw in medical science. Nonetheless, the message that vaccines provides superior protection became a common refrain regarding all protection from COVID. Newly released documents from a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit show that documents reveal that senior health officials received new information shortly after their August 2020 declaration about an early pandemic study from Israel that came to an entirely different conclusion. That study presented data showing that natural immunity from a previous infection might be longer lasting protection against reinfection from COVID-19 than vaccination. Yet it was not included in any updated public messaging, right? They ignored the science to sell drugs for their grifty pharmaceutical funders. That's what they did. They're criminals. They sold, they hurt our families. They killed your mother and grandmother and grandfather. They killed, young people that had cardiomyopathy, heart and things, who never should have had the vax. These are criminals. Their time must come. Okay, lighten up a little bit, go to a little different stories and maybe not so intense. I'm sorry, just get worked up over this stuff. It's a real war. There's real casualties. People are being killed from the left and on the right. And that's the way it's going to be until this war is settled. We must throw them out of power. They must never have power again. So this story's, a little bit too light. Cracker Barrel blasted for rebrand that scraps beloved logo. Crime against humanity, some users call it. So there's a big controversy, and Nan and I like to go to Cracker Barrel. We love the atmosphere. We love the food. We love the little shop where you can pick up some things, okay? And they have a new woke CEO, and they're rebranding, and everybody's upset. The beloved family restaurant Cracker Barrel is taking serious heat online for a rebranding effort that many fans absolutely despise. The main update is a logo change for the first time in 47 years. They took the old gentleman and the barrel off, and it just says Cracker Barrel, okay, in their new logo. And, the public doesn't like it. As a brand designer that worked at Cracker Barrel for almost 9 years, watching them commit brand suicide is something. One popular response on X said, Cracker Barrel has been a staple for years. They've always embraced tradition and old-fashioned dining, their poster wrote. The new logo was recognizable for generations of people. What changed? Why change something that didn't need to change? It's depressing, okay? Well, they got a woke CEO. This woman, Julie Massino, is a new CEO, and she has been tied to LGBTQ stuff. She's been worked for Taco Bell and Starbucks, who was woke as a joke, and now she's their new CEO. And they're not just changing the logo, they're quote-unquote modernizing all the stores. And she says it's working, but the stock market says it's not, as the brand declined like 41%. The stock declined 41% this week. Cracker Barrel needs to feel like Cracker Barrel for today and for tomorrow. The things that you will love are still there. We need people to choose us and want people to choose us, she said about the rebranding. In addition to the logo change, the restaurants have been undergoing remodeling to look more modern. The execs insist store managers are keen to get their stores on the list for remodeling, but again, the reaction on social media seems to be mostly negative. Okay, the new Cracker Barrel remodel is the biggest architectural catastrophe since Penn Station. I'm so serious, one person said. Cracker Barrel, more like corporate sterile. Well, Nan and I have noticed that when we go to Cracker Barrel, it's older people. And the fact of the matter is, go to any restaurant and it's older people, because young people don't go to restaurants. They use DoorDash. They have it delivered. It's in the statistics. So I understand that the new CEO is trying to do something to help the brand, but alienating the base you have to get a new group of people that I don't think you can get strikes me as stupid. Now, I asked Nan if she wants to stop going. I kind of felt like I didn't want to go anymore, but she likes it, and so we'll probably go. But go woke, go broke ain't just a saying. It's been proven to be real, and this could take another place we like off the table. So I'm not too happy about that news. I'm not too happy they messed with what they had. They didn't just try to improve. They tried to destroy what they had. And I don't think it's going to work. Okay. This story I told you about, and then it happened. Intel, days after Intel CEO meets with Trump, the federal government is reportedly negotiating a stake in the chips company. Well, they're not negotiating. They did it. The U.S. government took a 10% stake in the chip maker, the only U.S.-based chip maker, Intel, this week. In a potentially dramatic shift to corporate America and U.S. industrial policy, the Trump administration is actively considering a plan. They did it to stake in Intel, one of the world's largest and most strategically important chip makers, and the recent target of fierce criticism from the president himself. This kind of direct government involvement as a tech giant marks a notable departure from more hands-off approach favored by nearly all previous U.S. administrations. Traditionally, federal support for chip making came mainly in the form of grants or subsidies, such as those allocated under the CHIPS Act. Trump's approach appears to favor direct equity stakes, echoing recent White House moves in other sectors, such as the federal government taking a golden share while allowing Nippon Steel to acquire U.S. Steel, and the Department of Defense buying $400 million in preferred shares in MP Materials, a miner of rare earth materials. Folks, this is what they did in World War II. The government had no choice. They literally took over companies. And while we love capitalism and we don't believe in this, I think this should show us, warning, warning. We are in so much trouble that this kind of action is necessary for Trump to do. And it's a little scary because Intel is our biggest American chip maker, but they're behind. They're not making chips that are driving AI. But we need to have chips made here to protect our national interests, our national security. And when you talk about the rare earth mining, Stephen Moore put out a graph about Chinese dominance in rare earths. OMG. Oh my God, kids. They own like 90% of the market. And these rare earth materials are the future. And so that's why we bought, and we've got rare earth minerals here. We just have to ignore them. We have ignored them. Why? Partially because, as Trump says, we're stupid, but partially because the communist Chinese bought off our government employees and our politicians and wanted us to be vulnerable. And we are. This is a signal, kids. This is a lot more important than maybe even I thought. Scary stuff. Scary stuff, okay? Let me go into this next story that was really disappointing to me. Really disappointing. Newsmax agrees to pay $67 million to Dominion voting machines to settle the 2020 election defamation case. I'm just stunned by this. I'm stunned by this because I think evidence is going to come out about the 2020 election that Dominion machines were used to cheat. And to my knowledge, there still hasn't been a real investigation of can Dominion machines be used to change votes. I haven't seen our federal government, the FBI, open up a bloody machine and see what's in it. And so they settled. And I'm like, why? Newsmax will pay $67 million to settle a libel suit over its false claims that Dominion voting systems had changed votes in the 2020 presidential election. As part of the settlement, Newsmax will pay Dominion $27 million this month and another $40 million over the next 2 years. The settlement was reached on August 15th. We are pleased to have settled this matter, Newsmax said in a statement, though it stood by its coverage as fair, balanced, and conducted within professional standards of journalism. So we're going to give you $67 million, but we don't believe we were wrong. Why didn't you fight to the end to prove it? I asked my friend, Catherine Engelbrecht from True the Vote, why would they do this? And she said money. They just didn't want to spend the money to fight it, like True the Vote has done. Okay? This settlement is the conclusion of a lawsuit Dominion filed in 2021, accusing the network of knowing, airing conspiracy theories that claim the company was involved in vote rigging. Claims including that Dominion software was manipulated voter counts, that Dominion had ties to a Venezuelan company, and Dominion paid kickbacks to certain government officials. To my knowledge, all of those things are true. The $1.6 billion lawsuit accused Newsmax of making false claims in at least 18 statements on the air. Now remember, that guy who helped found LinkedIn, the Democrat provocateur, helped fund these lawsuits. And remember, they got Fox News to settle for $787 million. Okay, this was lawfare. The settlement comes months after Judge Eric Davis ruled that Dominion presented, now get this, the judge says they presented clear and convincing evidence that the statements from the Newsmax were false and defamatory. I'd love to see that evidence. Their statements. Was there evidence? The Delaware Superior Court judge moved to allow the case to go to trial to allow a jury to decide whether the defamatory statements were made with malice. The trial will not take place not that the two sides have reached a settlement. What the hell? What is the truth? Newsmax, why didn't you keep going? Go to trial. I want to see the evidence. How could they prove that? Just take the part about the Venezuela. It's clear as can be that the Dominion software was originally created to steal elections in Venezuela. There's a clear trail there. We got to get to the bottom of this. But this was really disheartening, and I'm sure it wasn't too great for all of you folks out there who bought Newsmax stock only to see them settle like this. Boy, that was disturbing. This is not disturbing. This is good news. Let's go on with some good news. We'll finish up the podcast with some good news. Average American received $3,752 tax cut in 2026 from Trump's big, beautiful bill, report says. I hadn't heard this all tied together. Sure didn't get much coverage. You want to share this. This is about your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. According to a Nonpartisan Tax Foundation report, taxpayers in every state will see reduced taxes. The White House is touting a new economic analysis that estimates taxpayers will see an average of $3,752 tax cut in 2026 due to provisions in the Big Beautiful Bill. President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill is the largest, most consequential tax cut on the middle class ever, White House Deputy Secretary Anna Kelly said Friday. Between lower inflation, massive investments, and historic tax cuts, all Americans are reaping the benefits of the Trump economy, and the golden age has just begun. Republicans' multi-trillion-dollar Big Beautiful Bill, among other things, made permanent the expiring 2017 tax cuts, and the Jobs Acts across the board reduced tax rates. $15,000 standard reduction, $2,000 child tax credit, 20% QBI deduction for small businesses, and $750,000 home mortgage interest deduction caps. Okay, 3 key business tax credits were made permanent as well. Full reimbursements for new capital investments like machinery and equipment, and expanded deduction for corporations' interest on debt, and an immediate deduction for companies' research costs. The Big Beautiful Bill also amended a host of temporary tax provisions set to expire in 2030, including a quadrupling of the $10,000 state and local tax SALT tax deduction. We weren't happy about that. A $6,000 deduction for seniors. We're happy about that. Temporary tax deduction for tips and overtime pay, capped for single filers at $25,000 and $12,500 respectively. Taken together, the Tax Foundation analysis estimates a Big Beautiful Bill tax provisions will lower individual taxes in every state and create 938,000 full-time jobs in the long run. Okay, your congressmen, Republicans who passed this, have been home all month, supposed to help sell the Big Beautiful Bill so people will understand what we did. Instead, we have Democrats still saying it was a tax cut for the wealthy. This is all for billionaires. There's nothing in it for you. This is a direct ask. Since your congressman didn't have the stones to go out in your community and trumpet this, you must. I'm asking you to go to wethepeopleconvention.org, right? And click on this story in our link to all the stories, get the actual paper document, the link to it, and text it to people. And email it to people. And post it on your other social media. Because did you know that? I think it's a pretty big deal that I'm going to get a $3,700 tax cut. Some states like Wyoming, I think they're going to get $5,000. Other states like West Virginia are lower. It all depends on what state you're in. But that's news. You didn't get that news. No one you know got that news. It's up to you to give them that news. That's big time. This was big time. Trump's bogus lawfare damages of close to $500 million in the New York lawfare case was thrown out. You lose, Trump wins. Court throws out illegal New York lawfare damage of $500 million. An appeals court has thrown out the massive civil fraud penalty against President Donald Trump, a huge win for Trump over the lawfare waged against him in the run-up to the 2024 election. A panel of 5 judges in New York's mid-level appellate division ruled Thursday that the original verdict secured by New York Attorney General Letitia James and Judge Arthur Erdogan's court was excessive. Okay? They threw out the damages, but they didn't throw out the verdict. That's going to be appealed, okay, to the Supreme Court, and Trump's going to win that as well. But Letitia James, guess what, sweetie? The whole lawfare that you coordinated with the White House, which the evidence is clear, Joe Biden's White House instigated this. And now isn't it ironic that she's being charged with real estate fraud, and she tried to get Trump on bogus charges of real estate fraud. She needs to be disbarred. Hopefully she's going to be wearing an orange jumpsuit, and Erdogan, he's got to be dealt with as well. Why did this take so long? Why did this take so long? Because they're still playing politics. We're still fighting the fight against the deep state, but Trump just won a big victory in the courts. Here he won again. Supreme Court allows Trump administration to terminate $783 million in NIH grants linked to DEI initiatives. This is huge because, again, remember, all they did was lawfare. As soon as Trump got in, what was the goal? Make sure he can't be president. The Democrats in the Senate, with the help of the Republicans, are keeping his nominees for jobs from being confirmed. They had lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. You can't fire employees. You can't shut down this agency. You can't do anything. They were wrong on all of it, and Trump is winning on all of it. And we are winning. You and I are winning because this is what we voted for. By a 5-4 vote, the Supreme Court on Thursday agreed to allow the National Institute of Health, the largest public funding source for biomedical research in the world, to terminate $783 million in grants linked to DEI initiatives. In a brief unsigned order, the court granted a request from the Trump administration to pause a ruling by a federal judge in Massachusetts that required the federal government to continue making the payments. They don't have to make them anymore. DEI is dead because once you defund it, it doesn't exist. No one wanted it. It was forced upon people, not just here, around the globe by the NIH and other agencies, USAID and all that stuff. And we're stopping it. This is how you win the culture war. This is how you stop the revolution with the counter-revolution. And so let's talk about the Trump DC crime crackdown, okay? Oh, you can't do that. You can't, this is Trump's a dictator. It's racist. It's racist. Oh, yeah? Yeah, here's the results so far. Crime crackdown in the swamp, 400 arrests in 10 days. You'll see this chart. Robbery down 46%. Carjacking is down 83%. Car theft down 21%. Violent crime down 22%. Property crimes down 6%. All crimes down 8%. But guess what the biggest thing was? They went for a week in Washington, D.C. without a single murder, and no one can remember when that last happened. No one can remember when that last happened. Okay? So they're losing big time on this. And Trump's going to go to other places. Now, I got to do something real quick to make the audio work on this. So just stick with me while I do this, okay?
We have to.
Click here.
And after we do this, we'll go to another location and we'll make it safe also. We're going to make our country very safe. We're going to make our cities very, very safe. Chicago's a mess. You have an incompetent mayor, grossly incompetent. And we'll straighten that one out probably next. That'll be our next one after this. And it won't even be tough. And the people in Chicago, Mr. Vice President, are screaming for us to come. They're wearing red hats, just like this one. But they're wearing red hats. African-American ladies, beautiful ladies, are saying, please, President Trump, come to Chicago. Please. I did great with the black vote, as you know, and they want something to happen. So I think Chicago will be our next, and then we'll help with New York, and we're going to help with, and I think a lot of these people that you see on television, They're including the people in this audience. They'll say bad things about me, and then they'll say, thank God he's here, because half of them got mugged.
Okay? It's not stopping in D.C. And Charlie Kirk had a great statistic. He said, this is my favorite statistic about the D.C. crime thing. He said, of the 1,065 murders in Washington, D.C., and I don't know if that was over 10 years or what the time span was. He says, of the 1,065 murders in D.C., all but 5 were black people. 5. But you got all these white people saying, it's racist to try to stop the killing of black people. It's racist. Really? No, it's not. And I saw a guy, I think it was on Newsmax. I couldn't tell if he was a politician or just a commenter. Really good-looking, big black guy was on doing commenting on this on a panel. And he said, I think places other than New York and Chicago are going to be calling for this. He said, look at Rochester, New York, which I've been to, and it is Beirut. It's a disgrace, Rochester, New York. No offense to you folks, but you know it's true, okay? He said, there's young black people killing young black people every night there. He said Trump needs to send people there. And he does. He does need to send people there. When did we get to the point in this country that we just accepted murders? When did we get there? And when did we get there? When we accept murders of minorities. And when did the minority leaders like Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson and Barack Obama and all the rest of these, Letitia James, when did they get to the point where, oh yeah, a few black kids got killed last night. That's okay. Matter of fact, we're going to let the person that killed them off. How did we get there, folks? How did we get there? We got to get out of this. It's immoral. It's society crushing. And look what's going on in D.C. People are handing out thank you cards to National Guardsmen. People are talking about how they went to a restaurant last night and it was unbelievable because they weren't hassled. You think other people don't want this? You think Trump isn't going to win big time in 2026? Meaning the Republicans, if he cleans up these cities? Are you kidding me? And again, I told you last week, it's two-sided. It's not just we're cleaning up these cities, it's we're taking out their army that was going to overthrow our country. That's who these 400 arrests are. They're the stormtroopers for the commies. That's who we're taking off the streets, and you can't stop in D.C. And then someone said to me, well, what happens in D.C. if Trump does this for a month, it's all cleaned up, and then he goes to Chicago and D.C. starts backsliding? You think people are going to accept that? It's just like the border. Oh, it can't be closed. It can't be closed. He closes it. You think anybody's going to want it open again? You think anyone's going to believe? You think they're going to elect the scumbags who lied to them, who said you couldn't do anything about it, when Trump just said, here's how you do it? And remember, the mayor of D.C. and the city council, they had the right to request Trump to bring troops in at any time. They didn't do it. He's opening the eyes of Hispanics, of blacks, of every minority to the lies of the commie left. This is way bigger, folks. It's way bigger. And it's working. And this is other good news. We're going to wrap up with some great good news, folks. You're going to love the end of this podcast. Donald Trump to achieve the largest cut in a federal workforce in 80 years. And it was what is being called the single largest cut in civilian federal employment since World War II. 2025 will end with 300,000 fewer workers employed in the United States government. The new Office of Personnel Management Director, Scott Cooper, told several news outlets that the federal workforce will drop from 2.4 million to 2.1 million employees, largely as a result of the Department of Government Efficiency's efforts. In a lengthy interview this week with Washington, D.C. station KTOP, Kupar said that 80% of the reductions come from federal workers choosing to access buyouts or other programs that pay them while they look for other work. I think that the team that designed those buyouts did as much as they could to help get these people to leave because they really didn't have good jobs. It's just wrong. Another 20% were fired. Total reduction amounts to 12.5% decrease in the federal workforce. President Harry Truman reduced the civilian workforce by 1.3 million following World War II, understandably, largely in the defense industry. Other presidents, including Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton, made substantial reductions, though theirs, unlike President Trump's, took multiple years to accomplish and were not this big. 300,000 people out of the federal workforce, that's what you and I voted for, didn't we? That's what we voted for. We think there should be more. Remember, we talked about DOGE and we were coming in. You could cut 40% of the workers in the federal government and we wouldn't know the difference. I still believe that's true. This is a start, not a finish line, but it's good news. And I wanted to share that with you. This is another important story. Trump tariffs projected to cut deficit by $4 trillion. $4 trillion, the deficit. Now remember, there's the debt, which is $37 trillion. Then there's the deficit, which is our annual, right now they're projecting $1.8 trillion that we will spend more than we take in. The tariffs are going to help cut into that, and that's what Trump's been saying. Let's see here. A new Congressional Budget Office analysis projects that President Donald J. Trump's tariff policies could slash federal deficits by $4 trillion over the next decade. That's $400 billion a year. So if we have a $1.8 trillion deficit this year, that would knock it down to 1.4. Trump is saying that will help, and then we'll have more income tax, more income because of job expansion. So, Trump's working on it. This is a step, but it's important. If President Trump's tariff policies persist for the next 10 years, the CBO estimates $3.3 trillion reduction in primary deficits. Furthermore, the increased tariff revenue would decrease the need for federal borrowing, cutting interest payments by $700 billion, collectively driving the total deficit reduction to $4 trillion. These findings highlight the potential of Trump's tariff strategy to significantly lower federal deficits and reduce dependence on borrowing, in addition to its primary goal, which is what? Of making American products more competitive against cheap foreign goods and producing, better jobs in the United States through reshoring. So this is the CBO saying Trump's tariffs are going to have a $4 trillion impact. That's not nothing, folks, but it's also going to have some issues with cost of goods, as we talked about last week. So all eyes are on the Federal Reserve. All eyes are on this meeting that Powell had in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Fed's Powell signals a possible rate cut and the market rallies. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell hinted at an upcoming interest rate cut as risks to the central bank's dual mandate, maximum employment, and price stability increase. In his final keynote address at the Jackson Hole Economic Symposium, Powell indicated that current economic conditions may warrant a reduction to the benchmark federal fund rate. With policy in restrictive territory, the baseline outlook and the shifting balance of risk may warrant adjusting our policy stance, he said. U.S. labor market remains in a solid position, the central bank chief stated, despite the July unemployment rate. Various job indicators such as layoffs, nominal wage growth, and quits have little changed. And while the unemployment stands at a historically low of 4.2% and has been broadly stable the past year, that would suggest interest rate cut is coming. We need that. The markets went ballistic. I mean, the Dow Jones was up 1,000 points. The NASDAQ was up 2%. All of you who bought the dip when Trump announced, the Independence Day and the tariffs, and the market crashed, and it's a tragedy, and there'll be trade wars, and it'll be disaster. And those of us who believe in Trump and trust him, we bought the dip. We bought Tesla, Apple, NVIDIA, whatever. And baby, we're raking it in. So that's awful good news as well. right? That's great news for all of us who trusted Trump. And, you know, we're still not out of the woods, but it's a good thing. Okay. This next story is, yeah, you're just going to love it because it's so rich and it's so past due and it's so amazing that it's happening now. This is from Breitbart. No more birthing persons, LGBTQIA+, fractured Dems instructed to talk like normal people. They're being advised, the Dems are being advised by a think tank, because of course they don't have any common sense. They can't figure this out for themselves, that what they've been doing with words and language has been off-putting and costing the voters. Talking points are out instructing Democrats to stop using terms like birthing person and LGBTQIA+, and to begin talking again like normal people. First, the details, and then I'll go into what's so glorious. The third way, a leftist think that proposes as moderate, released a memo Thursday calling on Democrats who wish to stop Donald Trump and MAGA to stop using words and phrases no ordinary person would ever dream of saying. Right? How in their face is that? The third way's blacklist is broken down into 6 categories. And I'll link to this story, and you can actually go to their memo that lays this all out. There's 6 categories: therapy speak, seminary room language, organizer jargon, gender orientation correctness, the shifting language of racial constructs, and explaining away crime. Their 6 categories are mumbo jumbo BS. Okay, so the woke third way leftist think tank who's telling them to speak like normal people can't speak like normal people. But they do get better. It's beyond me why it's not under the category of Orwellian bullshit. And here's the taste of the blacklisted terms along with my interpretation of what they really mean. He says, stop using incarcerated people. Call them criminals. Stop saying triggered and say, tell the truth. Stop talking about microaggressions, body shaming, subverting norms, systems of oppression, cultural appropriation, food insecurity, housing insecurity, persons who immigrated. Yeah, they're called illegal foreigners, birthing person, a woman, pregnant people, a pregnant woman, cisgender, dead naming. That's one of my favorite ones. Involuntarily confined. They lost in court and were convicted, and it's justice. They're in prison. This is fantastic for 2 reasons. First, what we have here is a call coming from the inside the House. Democrats are openly telling Democrats that they have lost the culture wars to you and I, which they have, because Democrats have become anti-fun, anti-truth, oppressive, humorless, anti-normal killjoys who talk like Hal from 2001 and want to queer our kids. But here's the best part. What will they say instead? You can't use these terms. What do you got to do? Well, if you can't say birthing person, you have to say pregnant people. What happens? You have to either come up with another equally stupid term, which doesn't fix the problem, or if you talk like a normal person, you will alienate your friends because they don't want you to be a normal person. They want you to be an ideological nut job. They're caught. They're just completely caught. Second, ever since the era of Obama, Democrats have made the grave error of radicalizing their base with the poison of identity politics. Today, that tail wags the dog. Democrats are stuck with these radicals, with these unforgiving fascists who demand loyalty tests and 100% fealty. And the language you use is the most important part of the test. If you don't use the approved language, then your friends are going to call you a Nazi and a fascist. You're doomed. You have no choice but to leave them. Democrats have painted themselves in a corner where any attempt to appear moderate will result in a brutal backlash from the wealthiest and most intolerant part of their base. So where do they go? What do they do? You have to leave. You have to say bye-bye to those friends of yours who have a mental illness. They're mentally ill. They've been indoctrinated by the communists in their schools. Pre-K 12, all the way through college. They indoctrinate them, they confuse them about everything from their gender to their views of life to who our country is. And now they're faced with the harsh reality. And it's a beautiful thing. So you keep talking like normal people to these people, and hopefully pretty soon they're going to start talking like normal people back to you. We can only hope. We can only hope. A couple more stories as we close. Last week I said YouTube was now using AI to determine whether you should be able to access certain videos because of age restrictions. This week, Google expanded that age verification to search. Now that only makes sense, right? It's the same company who owns YouTube. Google owns YouTube. And so they're going to restrict your access to videos on YouTube that are not child appropriate, right? Age appropriate. Well, now, if you go on Chrome, which all the kids have Chromebooks at school because Google gave them to them, right? Okay. So they could spy on your kids. Well, now if you use Google to search and you search on an inappropriate thing, if you search for pornography, Google's going to say, I'm sorry, you don't qualify. You're not old enough. And then you're going to have to provide an ID. Now, I know some of you are screaming about it. I told you last week, I'm not hearing your screams because we have to protect children. And we have let pornography be allowed for so long. And it's so destructive. Go look it up. Go study that. Use your AI to study it. And so I applaud this effort. X has to do this. There's bad things on all social media. We need to stop young people from being exposed to this sick content. And I'm really excited about that. Share that article with people. And then last week I talked in the show. I said, tell President Trump to say no about reclassifying marijuana as a class 3 drug because the marijuana industry wants it, but it's not, it shouldn't be done. And then I had referenced a Charlie Kirk. I had seen his show during the week and he made a great case. Well, after last week's podcast, I found his video. It's only 10 minutes. And I put it up in our video section at wethepeopleconvention.org. Go to the video section and there's a 10-minute video from Charlie Kirk where he just destroys the case for marijuana. Just destroys it. You need to share that video. And then on that page, I put a link that said, you'll click here to send your message to President Trump telling him not to reclassify marijuana as a class 3 drug. And on that page, I also shared the story about him being, given money by the marijuana industry, trying to buy influence with him and trying to get him to reclassify us because they would make a ton of money. And thousands of you clicked on this link and wrote to President Trump at whitehouse.gov/contacts. And if you go to wethepeopleconvention.org, watch this video, share it with other people, and get them to write to President Trump. And then I clicked on a link. I had a link in that video of our story that we had. I said the whole marijuana safe scam is falling apart and lots of people are being hurt. So you can be fully up to speed on how wrong this is. We need to make marijuana illegal again. Illegal. It should not be just out there. It doesn't have the health benefits. It's hurting people badly. Don't believe me? Go look. Go look, okay? But most of all, we got to protect our kids. And I'm glad that YouTube and Google are doing this. And I hope you will share these stories. They're really important, okay? So now I'm going to wrap up this podcast. And I'm going to play a video here again, which I didn't load beforehand. So it's going to be like that other video where I got to click on it to make it play audio. So bear with me because this is an important story.
Tonight, 1,700 National Guard troops are now set to mobilize across 19 states over the coming weeks. They are going to help Homeland Security execute a sweeping federal crime and immigration crackdown that is underway now. The order is effective August through mid-November, Fox News is learning, and a U.S. defense official tells Jackie Heinrich and Liz Frieden the National Guard being mobilized will effectively serve as a support pillar.
Okay, so what that story was about, a matter of fact, let me just play it again just so you get all of it.
Tonight, 1,700 National Guard troops are now set to mobilize across 19 states over the coming weeks. They are going to help Homeland Security execute a sweeping federal crime and immigration crackdown that is underway now. The order is effective August through mid-November, Fox News is learning, and a U.S. defense official tells Jackie Heinrich and Liz Frieden the National Guard being mobilized will effectively serve as a support pillar.
I started this podcast by saying we are in a hot civil war. Police officers are being killed. Illegal aliens are being killed. Civilians are being killed. Arrests are being made. Agencies are being shut down. Money is being taken away from the communist left. I said that Trump's actions in DC were about this fight, taking their army off our streets. I said, Trump said he's moving to Chicago next. He's going to these other cities. This statement that President Trump is mobilizing the National Guard across 19 states as part of a surge to support mass deportations and crack down on crime, and that it would take place by the administration this year in the next 3 to 6 months. He's not doing that just because of crime. He knows that we may be facing open warfare, and he's mobilizing the U.S. military to crush it. And the left is going to scream he's a dictator, and you're going to see troops in the streets. And he just got the right, by the way. He sent armed soldiers now to D.C., armed. And he's mobilizing them in 19 states. This ain't for fun, kids. This ain't for yucks. This is serious. I warned you last week, and I strongly suggest you go back to wethepeopleconvention.org, okay, and go to the video section and watch the video. We are in a hot civil war with the commie Dems in the U.S. where I lay out the case that this is true and that President Trump has to fight it and win it. And you don't fight it and win it with words. You fight it and win it with force. All of society is based on force. That's why you have police departments, because you can have laws, thou shalt not steal, but if you don't have someone with a gun to arrest you when you do steal, you're going to steal. We are under serious threat at home and abroad. And God saved Donald J. Trump so that he could save our nation. And we are going to have to be ready to support him every step of the way, even though it's going to be scary and there's going to be things that we're not too comfortable with, right? Because what do we know about government? What did we learn during COVID? Oh, whoa, we're going to suspend the law because there's extraordinary circumstances, and then they never went back. And we're going to spend trillions of dollars more because of COVID, but then they never went back. And that's our fear as conservatives, that we're going to have to use troops in the streets to impose civil peace and enforce the law. And then can we go back? Or do we become something else? Does Donald Trump have to serve after 2028? Because we frickin' need him. I don't know. But I'm telling you right now, that's more likely than a lot of us think. These are just my opinions. This is just how I see it. But I'm giving you the evidence. I'm providing the tea leaves for you to read. Something big is coming. And I, for one, am glad that we're in charge, that we have these resources that President Trump can wield. I thank God that he saved Donald Trump. I thank God that you, people watch this podcast, and I gave everything we had to put us in this position. but we got to finish the job. We have to drive the commies out of our country, off the planet. They are a cancer. We've got to drive the Islamic fascists. We've got to drive them off the face of the earth. There is no place for Sharia law. If we want to be free, we have to fight and we have to win. We are fighting. We are winning. But there's going to be casualties, and it's going to be ugly. Just like World War II, just like World War I, just like Vietnam, just like every war, just like Ukraine. Pray. Pray for Donald Trump and everyone in his administration. Pray for God to give you the courage to fight when the time comes. Pray for our country, because tough times are coming. But I believe in God, and I believe that we will win. I believe that we will have justice. In closing, I ask you to share this podcast with everyone. Tell people about this podcast. Write to me at info@wethepeopleconvention.org if you disagree. Send me stories. Send me the things that I haven't heard that I can share so that you will hear. Share the stories that I just gave you. Tell people about, the income tax savings you're going to have, right? Share this. Tell people about, the big, beautiful bill. Share the stories about Google, stopping young people from accessing pornography. Write to the president about not making marijuana more available. Fight for your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. We're not spectators. We're participants. We're the 3%. We're the 3%. Thank you for taking your time to watch this podcast and for sharing it with others. I hope you have a great week. Smile at the victories. Take time to get away from it. College and high school football starting. College football starting. The fall weather is coming. Enjoy your freedom and liberty. Don't be negative. Despite the concerns, be positive. God willing, we'll both be back together again next week. You've been listening to the We the People Convention News and Opinion podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski. May God bless you, and God has already blessed the United States of America. See you next week.
So proudly we hailed at the twilight